listen close. It's that time of year again, where if you're quiet and you really, really pay attention, you can hear the sound. Can you guys hear it? It's the sound of children weeping. Oh yeah, it's back to school time, so grab your shit because you're gonna be late for tonight's video where I am counting down 5 of my favorite back to school horror films. How's it going, creeps? Welcome back to Cinema Creep. Cinema Creep is a place where we discuss, dissect, and review all things vile, disgusting, and downright terrifying in the world of horror cinema. And this video is no exception because it is about one of the most horrifying things of all, going back to school. And because I like to make things hard, I decided not to include any of the better or more recognized all-time great horror school movies on this list. You won't find films like Scream, The Faculty, Carrie, or even Prom Night on this list. Instead, I'm focusing on some movies you may not have seen. You know, I'm talking about the B-sides. So let's get into it. What are you waiting for? The first film on this list is one that has aged like spoiled milk, but for some reason, I still love it for how batshit crazy it is, and it gets tonight's award for being the dumbest kid in class. I'm talking about Class of Nukem High from 1986. If you haven't seen this movie but you know trauma films, then you already know you're about to be waist deep in stupidity. Class of Nukem High is about students at Tromaville High School that is located next to a nuclear power plant where students start acting strange after buying and using contaminated drugs from a worker from the nearby nuclear plant. Overall, this movie is gross and stupid, just like my high school years, chock full of crude and lewd humor. Also, like my high school years, Nukem High is a horror comedy, and most of the movie you will be thinking to yourself, why would anyone watch this shit? To me, that sort of adds to the charm of the movie, though. It's almost like they were just picking ideas from a hat and filmed this the very same day. The acting is over the top and the characters are fucking ridiculous. And seeing the characters and costumes in this movie is half of the fun because it's honestly just wild. The film has some fun gore and practical effects. And honestly, this movie is a lot more fun to watch with a group of friends because this isn't a shit show you're going to want to endure alone. But with that said, I love this dumbass movie and I recommend you watch it and show it to any young people that you may know that are about to start high school in the near future as a warning, and tell them that high school is exactly like this film. Next up is Return to Horror High from 1987, which, believe it or not, is not the sequel to the movie Horror High. And I know you're thinking, wait a minute, that's dumb. And you're right. Return to Horror High is about a series of gruesome murders that occurred at Crippen High School in the early 1980s. Then a few years later, a film crew uses the now abandoned high school as a film set for a film as an uninvited guest makes an appearance on the set. Return to Horror High is another horror slasher comedy with some actual funny moments in it. The movie is increasingly more hilarious if you are a filmmaker or have ever tried to make a film, as the crew making the movie in the high school is dealing with all sorts of production issues that you would face in real life. The movie has some really hilarious moments as it moves between actual events unfolding in the crew's film, and sometimes you don't know which is which until they call cut. But it's all enjoyable as people are killed in creative ways and sometimes really dumb ways too. But the gore is good and there is a lot of blood in this. Overall, the acting is surprisingly decent with some truly likable characters, with my favorite in the film being played by Marsha Brady herself, Maureen McCormack, who plays Officer Tyler, and every time she appears on screen, she is covered in more and more blood. Her character is just fucking hilarious in this. Also, you get to see George Clooney in this. What humble beginnings. The best thing about this film is how far it goes off the rails in the third act and never lets up until the credits roll. Unlike my time during high school, this film is really enjoyable and I highly recommend it. Next up is a film that makes me want to projectile vomit in a good way. I'm not even sure what that means, so use your imagination. I wasn't expecting to put 2 trauma films on this list, but here we are. slumming it together. The third film on this list is Graduation Day, and the synopsis is a masked killer begins murdering students on the school track team after a track runner dies upon completion of a 30-second 200-meter race. With this film coming out after movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th, you could tell that horror producers were really looking for any holiday event or even any special occasion to center a horror film around. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that it shows in this movie, but somehow, again, it adds to the charm. And I guess that is what Troma is good for. If nothing else, having a little bit of charm in their movies. From the opening scene of the track and field montage cut with that weird-ass disco music, you can only assume that you're in for a treat in this one. The killer has some truly interesting kills as he is wearing a fencing mask and using a fencing sword to kill his victims, as well as using a stopwatch to time his kills, which is actually kind of gnarly, and that's the way that they tie it all back into the track and field theme. My favorite kill scene is the one where the killer throws a fucking football with a fencing sword in it, and instead of, moving out of the way, the fucking guy decides to catch it, and it ultimately impales him. Like, how do you not see a football with a sword in it coming at you? Just don't catch it. But nonetheless, it's still my favorite kill. There's also a really weird scene where the students are singing and dancing, and the dude that plays Kevin is playing the harmonica and doing this weird-ass Patrick Swayze from Dirty Dancing shit up on the lunch table. The 80s were a wild time, and why are weird dudes always named Kevin? There's also this 5-minute long scene seemingly out of fucking nowhere with a live performance from the band Felony, who are dressed as, I guess, maybe glam mobsters. And I think for some reason, half of the students are roller skating around the stage. This scene thankfully becomes less about the band and more as a kill scene that's intercut with it, because, again, this is just like a weird, fever dream of a scene. This shit is so strange. Overall, this movie is dumb and predictable, and it's sort of a standard slasher film, but I think it's enjoyable and one that you need to watch if you haven't seen it. Next up, we have a film that I'm not sure that could be made today, or at least not in the same way, due to some of the topics it touches on early on in the film. And I really don't think that they would have gotten away with a lot of what they say and do in this movie either. And I'm talking about a movie that is named after the second worst time of any school year, Final Exam from 1981. A psycho killer shows up on a college campus to slash up pretty co-eds and dumb jocks. Sounds like a perfect slasher, right? Well, not exactly, but it's good enough, and it meets the criteria constraints of this video, so you get what you get. When you look at reviews for this film, it is one of those films where you either really like it or you hate it, and to be honest, the first time I watched it, I hated it. After multiple watches, though, it has really grown on me like some sort of disease that I need to go get checked out, because something about loving this film is just wrong. It just doesn't feel right, but I like it. Some parts of the movie make you think, what the fuck, and think how wild the 80s were, especially with the character of Wildman. He is the epitome of 80s football jock, and I hate his guts so much. The movie is cheesy, and it is really a typical 80s slasher, with the biggest complaint being that there isn't much gore or blood to see in this one. Also, the killer doesn't start slicing up people till nearly almost an hour into the movie. However, unlike many slashers, you do get to spend a lot of time with the characters in this movie before the action gets started. Just enough time to make me hate them. And one of the things I really like about this movie, though, is that the killer doesn't really have a motive to start chopping up the students. And to me, that makes things even more scary and more frightening. Also, I surprisingly enjoy the movie's ending as it comes to a screeching halt as quick as the action got started. No over-the-top chase sequences or OP killer. He honestly is just a regular dude with a mushroom-looking haircut. And like I said before, what is scarier than Randy from down the street chasing after you with a knife with his New Balances on and his blue jean shorts? watch out because you're about to get clapped by the blue collar killer. Yo, that sounds sick. I should write that down. And all joking aside, the next film on this list is not only number 1 here, but it ranks in my top horror films of all time, and I'm talking about none other than Suspiria from 1977. So this is probably the most well-known movie on this list, but you would be amazed at how many horror fans that I meet that haven't seen this one from 1977, and they've only seen or heard about the remake. The synopsis is an American newcomer to a prestigious German ballet academy comes to realize that the school is a front for something sinister amid a series of grisly murders. So from the opening credits of this movie, you can already feel the impending doom of this movie with the eerie music performed by the band Goblin. The opening scenes are shot beautifully as Susie Bannon arrives in Germany at the Tanz Dance Academy. After arriving at the school, odd occurrences begin to happen and Susie begins to uncover the truth about the school, learning it was once a witch's coven and still might be. There's so much I could say about this movie, and although I think that it does have some flaws, I think you could still teach a filmmaking masterclass from this film and this film alone. Even though some of the acting is questionable in some parts of the movie, overall I really enjoy all of the characters. Everything from set design and costuming is done in such a dramatic and surrealistic way that it is only matched by the cinematography, which to me is so fucking beautifully done. Every frame in this movie is a masterpiece, and I mean that wholeheartedly. If you know a thing or two about me, then you know that I love neon cinematography, especially in horror, and if done right, who gives a fuck if the lights are motivated or not? Where is that light coming from that is drenching the entire scene in blue or red light? Who gives a shit? Argento doesn't care. So neither do I. The kills are a ton of fun in this film, with my favorite actually being the first kill that you see in the movie, where Pat Single is stabbed and pushed through the glass in the ceiling and hung from telephone cables. Just a beautiful kill scene if one was to exist. Reminds me of my elementary school days. And for that, Suspiria from 1977 is not only one of my favorite back-to-school movies, but it is also my favorite Dario Argento film. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. That's it for this one, creeps. Class is dismissed, and if you're headed back to school, good luck. Watch out for those maniacs. Remember, stay away from the dark hallways. And don't be the last kid on the bus. Lastly, don't forget to let me know how many of these films you've seen down in the comments, and let me know what your favorite back-to-school horror film is too. Also, don't forget to check the description for cool ways to help support the Cinema Creep channel. And last, but most definitely not least, don't be a chud and like the video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more horror content. And that's it. Stay creepy, and I'll see you guys on the next one. See ya.